Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unacademy. This is Success Sampath interacting with you. One second. Is it audible now, please, everyone? Hope you're okay. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, you know very well about Unacademy. This is India's largest and the best online education platform. One second. Let me check everything. Yeah, fantastic. Right. What are the benefits you're likely to get once you enroll yourself in an academy? Ladies and gentlemen, if that's going to be your question, yes, you got daily live classes like this. You can chat with your educator. You can engage yourself in all round productive discussions, and you can also ask all your genuine doubts and participate in the answer polls. All these things you can do when the session's going on. You got structured courses here which is completely based on UPSC civil service examination pattern and syllabus as well, so that we save your time and energy. You know that otherwise you stay on track. Ladies and gentlemen, one particular point we are keep on emphasizing in all my that in all our discussion. Let me put that way. Otherwise, so you've got a mechanism to evaluate preparation, your preparation in terms of various levels. You can ask me why. Yes, it's not knowing the stuff, knowing to deliver the stuff, because delivery matters. And based on that particular report, that based on your performance, the report, what you get detailed analysis. You come to know where you are strong, where you are weak, and the time you have consumed in solving a particular question. Ladies and gentlemen, you are ready to access all those unlimited videos, more than 1 million videos part of an academy, whatever may be your electronic device, whether it is mobile phone, laptop, desktop. Ladies and gentlemen, irrespective of your electronic device, you can learn from anywhere, anytime. Right? What you have to do, you have to download an Academy learning app immediately. Before going there, ladies and gentlemen, we 100 plus top educators of India with subject matter expertise, the 20 to 25 years of experience, the chosen field. Ladies and gentlemen, waiting there on the part of an academy to support you, so that you become officer or leader in your own capacity to become part of the steel pillars of Indian administration. What you have to do, as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, please download an Academy learning app immediately, whether it is Android or iOS. Ladies and gentlemen, once you download, you're ready to access all those benefits. Right. Who is this interacting with you? Ladies and gentlemen, of course, this is Success Sampath from Chennai. With unique experience of got exposed to the fields of engineering, management, and legal education, with 25 years of experience in the field of coaching, especially shaping the careers of civil service aspirants. Ladies and gentlemen, with my team, I could witness the humble results. Of course, all my kids are working in different parts of India. Some of them in abroad as well, part of Union External Affairs Ministry. When it comes to domestic, of course, that my kids as IAS officer, IPS, IFS, IRS, you might be aware, ladies and gentlemen. And I think, this could have prompted you ask me the question, what's your vision, sir? Yes, to be part of the solution, especially by simplifying the complexity. Ladies and gentlemen, that especially by providing career solution to the Indian youth to begin with, that is to embrace the global community. Fortunately, this particular vision of mine is completely in alignment with Unacademy's vision. We are working together. Together, we are building communities so that you become leader. Let me repeat, so that you become leader or officer. Otherwise, you reach your ambition or goal. Our role is to connect that to that particular purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also reach me through that Unacademy Telegram channel, Unacademy _ Sampath, or you can watch a lot of my videos already available on the part of Unacademy. Of course, you might be aware the very popular and highly scoring optional subject called sociology, and also that the ethics and integrity, which is said to be general studies, the part 4, that part of your mains examination, and which has got its own contribution of 250 marks, and in terms of theories and thinkers and case studies. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, and you know that when it comes to essay, you're going to write 2 essays given 3 hours time duration. You might be aware. Where comes, you know, the 250 marks contribution from UPSC Civil Service Examination Mains out of 1750, where you got variety of videos, and where I've taken into account, you know, that 25 years of question paper, you know, that of the very particular essay paper, jot down into 8 domains. You please watch those videos to benefit more. And also, you know, that a lot of topics belonging to international relations, the global state system. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, not only that, having downloaded Unacademy learning app, if you're already subscribed of, you know, Unacademy course, any one of the course, whether it is Plus or Iconic program, you know that you can go back and watch a lot of my videos when it comes to prelims, last 5-year questions, cutting across variety of segments of GS, you know that we have discussed a lot of questions. Several questions came the recent prelims 2020 also. We got fantastic feedback, you know, that incentivized us, that encouraged us, ladies and gentlemen, and that prompted us, you know, that to go for, you know, discussing the previous year questions meant for, you know, main examination, cutting across variety of segments of GS2. And we discussed, and not only that, when it comes to ethics and integrity, and prior to that examination, few topics we discussed, you know, those topics, you know, that immediately came the recent mains also, you know, all these things, you know, that very fantastic, you know, that encouraging experience for us. You please watch those videos and connect with the purpose you will come to know, and also go through the previous year question. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unacademy. This is Success Sampath interacting with you. Let's get in. Yes, under UPSC Civil Service Examination, ladies and gentlemen, we got more than 15,000 courses. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, we strongly advise you to go for, you know, either Plus program or Iconic program. You know, please use my referral ID, say Success, to avail maximum 10% discount. If you're going to use my referral ID Success when it comes to Plus program, you know, normally, you know, that you save your 9,000 rupees because of that discount. Here you got programs like 6 months program, 12 months program, you know, that otherwise 2 years program, 3 years program. Whether you are work going aspirant, college going aspirant, you can plan accordingly, plan flexibly. You know, that's why, you know, that we have got, you know, part of this Unacademy, several, you know, modules for you. Not only that, you can also choose, you know, Iconic program. In that, you know, you will be allotted a personal coach, a mentor, to understand your nature and to suggest study plan accordingly. Not only that, and to train you on everyday basis in terms of answer writing exercises. Ladies and gentlemen, where you can use, you know, my referral ID, say Success, to avail maximum 10% discount. Almost you save, ladies and gentlemen, 15,000 rupees you can save. You can save. Technically speaking, you end up paying mere 80 to 100 rupees if you calculate in terms of, you know, per day basis. The very money you spend on everyday basis in terms of your evening snacks, but you ensure your career. Ladies and gentlemen, this is as simple as that. I think, you know, it is right time. Let me take you to the next level. Yes. A variety of teams are the part of Unacademy waiting there to support you. Of course, our course begins, you know, in February. You might be, you know, that well aware, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, you know that whether it is 2 years program, whether it is 1 year program, 6 months program, variety of teams are the part of Unacademy, you know, that dare to support you. And you can also go for combination of both Iconic as well as Plus program. You go for, you know, GS Iconic. When it comes to optional, you can choose, you know, Plus program. Here too, you can use my referral ID, say Success, to avail maximum 10% discount, ladies and gentlemen. And otherwise, you can go for exclusively Plus program when it comes to both optional subject as well as, you know, the very GS programs, whether it is 1 year program, 2 years program, 3 years program. Ladies and gentlemen, use my referral ID, say Success, to avail maximum 10% discount. Ladies and gentlemen, you can save much money because of that. This is Success Sampath interacting with you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Unacademy once again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is right time. Let me take you in for the very purpose and direction of, you know, today's interaction. Ladies and gentlemen, we extremely feel sorry, you know, that this particular thing we already tried. You know, of course, you know, that previously what happened, right? We had technical issues, so we were forced to, you know, that abruptly stop in the middle of this particular, you know, the topic session. Ladies and gentlemen, after some, you know, that my personal loss, my grandma I lost, I am extremely sorry. So, you know, that you know, I'm meeting you again, ladies and gentlemen. We feel extremely sorry, but everything, you know, all in the game, you know, the part of the life, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you understand. So we are going to, you know, that do from the beginning. Some of you already complained, right? There was, you know, technical issue. It got fixed, I believe. But you got further issue also. You can, you know, that escalate that. We are ready to fix that. Ladies and gentlemen, let us get into the very purpose. What is this? This is about, you know, that which has got its own relevance, to the current affairs. What happened, right? That the very Nanda Devi peak, especially the beginning part of the Himalaya, where, that we talk about the glaciers, that the melting ultimately. So that resulted in the disastrous event. Of course, the Uttarakhand Chamoli district, you might be aware. And, that loss of lives, that's still reported, in the tunnel, and washed away of, that the very Tapovan, hydroelectric projects you might be. So this particular melting of, that the snow mountains, of course, you call glaciers. It has got its own link with global change, of course, global warming and climatic change. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular topic you can look at with, that geographical sense or even environmental science sense, when it comes to disastrous angle. And you can also, fix with, that Indian economy, because, the very event, threatening the very food security of India, and also that the energy security, because 1/3 of electricity what we generate out of India belonging to that particular the basin, you might be aware. And that you talk about North Pole, South Pole, but this you have to understand there is one more pole that's called third pole, the Deccan, not Deccan, of course, the Tibetan Plateau is otherwise called third pole. That the billion tons of that the ice glaciers we are talking about. So that ultimately the supporting the major the rivers of that. Otherwise, that the last lot of the drainage system on the part of that particular region, Indus region, the Indus drainage system, Brahmaputra drainage system, the Ganges, of course, Indo-Gangetic plain, supported by that, and Yangtze, Yellow River, everything. Otherwise, it's almost covering that part of West Asia, South Asia. You might be aware. So that's why very very important place, and which has got its own link, as I said at the beginning, a link with the climatic change, the change in climate. Ladies and gentlemen, you might be already aware of the difference between weather and climate. When it comes to atmospheric, the parameters, you call whether it is, temperature, pressure, rainfall, humidity, everything, ladies and gentlemen, you take into account, of course, when you calculate those parameters over a small region for a short span of time, it's called weather. What you watch in TV news, of course, every day, it's called weather report. It's not climatic report. But the same parameters, when it is applied, you measure, you calculate, you take into account for your analysis, for perusal or study or some research thing, maybe that for over large area, for longer span of time, that's called climate, ladies and gentlemen. So, but we address this issue linked with that not with weather report, rather with the change in climate, the change in atmospheric phenomena and its impact. The impact, it's not only disastrous and human holocaust, though it is man-made. Why? Because that we say the global warming, the adding of more carbon in the atmosphere, of course, man-made disaster. Of course, we talk about that anthropogenic factors parallelly. Of course, El Nino, La Nina, several the parameters, the change, the influencing monsoon also we are talking about. What happened ultimately? The global wide, it's not restricted to Himalayan region alone. Ladies and gentlemen, several Ohio State University, you come to know, that even the great researcher Thompson, and also that the New Zealand based research and Dutch research, and beyond that that what Indian government prepared that in from domestic angle, what sort of research the proves this way. We are going to discuss everything. So it's disastrous on the one hand, the Holocaust, human Holocaust we are talking about, and apart from that, threatening the food security and threatening the very energy security in that particular region. So from that angle we are going to discuss, and also the way forward. So that particular that even demands that. So we should be prepared to adapt to the new social milieu, new geographical milieu, not much depending on that particular region. Otherwise, that the report speaks in such a way by 2035, through one research, by 2045 another research, by 2060, that's by the totally different research, that there may not be glaciers at all. Then think about the population, the 2 billion population, of course, supported by that particular the system. The very Tibetan Plateau, otherwise called the third pole in the world, and given billion tons of the very ice, the glaciers. So all those Andes, Peruvian, Himalayan, the very glacier mountains, that the coming down, and also that. So it's not only even the breaking of ice sheets in the that Arctic and Antarctic region. Very recently, Larsen Sea, the sea, the sheet got broken. You might be aware. And how the Peruvian system, the coming down, shrinking down. So it poses, that several, threatening factors you might be aware. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, that demands, that the way forward, we have to adapt to the changing climatic conditions, and also, that the responsibility on we people, right? The anthropogenic factor, man-made disaster, to be responsible in terms of consumption. Our sophistication should not the make that environmental degradation otherwise by adding more carbon in that atmosphere, otherwise that all round pollution there, ladies and gentlemen, that otherwise makes us very humble, that how the vulnerable we are, otherwise that ultimately nobody can that defeat nature. The nature is invincible, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to that that should be that gelled with that ecosystem. We have to design our life in such a way that puts it some sort of responsibility also, ladies and gentlemen. So all these things that it's centered around that our discussion is going to be. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unacademy. This is Success Sampath interacting with you. Hope you are. If you feel that I'm going very fast, please tell me. I'm ready to that adjust my speed. So at the end of the day, that it should reach you the purpose. Excuse me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. So this is what Nanda Devi peak. Just see how it's going. That after melting, that almost like that, ladies and gentlemen. So before going there, there comes my responsibility to introduce and highlight the very importance of general studies. Ladies and gentlemen, general studies plays crucial role when it comes to making you as all India topper, as the all India civil servant, or a part of the central services group A and B. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, there I witnessed 60-40 mechanism. 60% related to the dynamic portion, of course related to the current affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, is it networking? Hope you're not witnessing net issue. 1 second, you also parallel check. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, I believe. Yes. The very general studies you might be well aware, that the 30 to 40% of the portion covered by static portion, maybe with the support of your NCRT and textbooks you cover. But when it comes to that 60 to 70% of the portion meant for your current affairs, ladies and gentlemen, you might be well aware where you get the support of the very editorials of Hindu, Indian Express, and also sometimes rarest of rare occasion we get good articles from Times of India, that that goes that, but mostly you can restrict yourself to the editorials and Press Information Bureau, Yojana, Kurukshetra, and also as I told you, right, several resources meant for the dynamic portion, that even frontline otherwise articles. When I say editorials, it's not only editorials of the Hindu and Indian Express, the columnists, the subject matter experts, that whose article you get the real flavor. So that way you can you be prepared for that. Even static portion which has got current relevance, maybe centenary year celebration, 150th year, like that, maybe institutions, you get current affairs questions. Of course, you have to understand when it comes to prelims, you got objective type, direct fact-based question. Of course, 200 marks in prelims. The general studies cutting across variety of segments. But whereas in mains, you might be aware where you got 1,000 marks, paper 1, 2, 3, per paper 250, 1, 2, 3. Paper 4, you might be aware, ethics and integrity, the UPSC civil service examination mains. 1, 2, 3, 3 into 250 marks. Of course, you talk about, ladies and gentlemen, 750 marks we are talking about. Right. It is that way. And beyond that, your essays, 2 essays, what you're going to write, without, much effort, you can meet. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way I'm talking about. And also, the very oral interview, you are going to be part of that, so, the preparation over GS is going to be highly supportive. And also when it comes to optional subject, the paper 2 of your optional, which has got current relevance, whatever may be your social science, that there also you get the support of general studies. That is that way. Ladies and gentlemen, 1,200 marks, that you can definitely get out of, general studies. That much significant, that the role played by the general studies when it comes to UPSC civil service examination. Of course, variety of segments you might be aware: environmental science, Indian economy, Indian constitution, or Indian polity and governance you call. Then geography. Of course, that you talk about, the history, ancient, medieval, modern, and even the postmodern when it comes to mains. You talk about that, and the art and culture and Indian society. and international relations, internal security. Ladies and gentlemen, everything, but in terms of 60-40 ratio, the dynamic east, that of course, the very static portion. Ladies and gentlemen, hope that you would have got through, but this particular topic is belonging to environmental science as well as geography, even current affairs, and also linked with Indian economy, because when it comes to threatening the very food security as well as the energy security of the India, and of course the environmental science, no doubt, climate change, global warming, and geography, you talk about the water, the pillars of the world, you call the very Himalayan water towers of the world, otherwise you see the third pole. We gone to that extent of saying or labeling that the very Tibetan plate supporting 2 billion population, the countries of the West Asia as well as South Asia, of course, the largest drainage system. That's why the impact we are talking about belonging to geography also. The recent, of course, that the flooding, of course, you talk about, because of that, the melting of, Himalayan glaciers, the Nanda Devi peak, we are talking about Uttarakhand, the Chamoli, of course, associated, that the disasters we are talking about, of course, relevant to the current affairs too. We're talking it that way. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, this is right time. And why I took up, because context, there came, one question recently. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about the one question recently came, that in 2020, I probably they would have predicted the event. That's what. But that it's the last one decade, several articles from several research-based organizations related to this, that the climatic change and global warming. You might be well aware. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So the climatic change, the change in the parameters of atmosphere. And why? It's because of that, that too very faster we are talking about. It's because of that, man-made disaster or anthropogenic factor, that our planet of the earth, that is becoming very warm. Of course, 1 degree Celsius, you might be aware, even in the environmental ethics we spoke. For every 1 degree, that rise, 1 degree Celsius rise of the temperature on the part of the planet of the earth, you might be very well aware. The 10% of species is getting washed away. For the sake of your comfort, that in the name of economic development, that you have to see other end of the coin, other side of the coin. What is that? There are guys losing their nations, and there are species, that completely thrown out of the planet of the earth. It is that way. So there should be a sustainable development that lasts forever. Development should not be at the cost of the future generation, or development should not be at the cost of other species. The planet of the earth is not restricted to humanity alone. There are other species too. There you talk about stewardship, our obligation towards other species. So it's not, that environmental racism that we practice so that other species are completely washed away. So the planet of the earth is meant for, that of course flora, fauna, that living, non-living, biotic, abiotic, even visible and invisible forms of life. We're talking that way, ladies and gentlemen. 1 second. Is it very clear, ladies and gentlemen? Very video. Very good morning, Ram Kumar, Aluwala, fantastic. That hope the video is very clear and the audio is clear. That if at all you find any difference, you please you can type, ladies and gentlemen. The very purpose, feel free to interact with us, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, right. It is right time. Yeah. So what is that? It is that way. The climatic change and melting of glaciers in the Himalaya, in what way it is changing, influencing, the change in climate. Of course, that even you would have already aware of this, because of this global warming, because of the El Nino and La Nina factors, even the very monsoon meant for India, that there you would have witnessed in the past, right? Justice delayed is justice denied otherwise. The several Supreme Court judgments you would have come to know. The same way, monsoon delayed is monsoon denied. It's that way. So why the onset of monsoon is getting delayed, sometimes it is disappointing. But this year, fortunately, the surplus monsoon we witnessed, that. So it has got its own impact on agriculture and associated the migrant population from rural to urban area. That forces government to announce schemes like Mandrega, and also, the already budget deficit. Then you have to avail loan. Otherwise, recently what happened in the budget, the public sector disinvestment, selling of the public sector units we are talking about to mobilize resources so as to address Not only social sector schemes, also the very Atmanirbhar, what happened in the the very recent budget we are talking about. So it has got its own link with the several segments of the society, several segments of the life. When it comes to several segments of your GS2, it's not a single geographical event. It has got its own a relationship, rest of the entities we are talking about. So it is that way. So the very global warming, so adding of more carbon in the atmosphere or part of the earth warmth, you might be aware. So the moment it has become warmth, what will happen? That ultimately melting of snow mountains in the polar region. Hitherto we spoke not only in the polar region, Arctic and Antarctic region, ladies and gentlemen, and breakdown of that Larsen Sea ice sheets. Not only that, and also the third pole we call, that's what, as I spoke now, ladies and gentlemen, very Tibetan plate, which is capable of supporting, accommodating the 2 billion population, and also the West Asian and South Asian countries, and also the largest drainage system we are talking about. Starting from Indus, basin to this side, of course, Brahmaputra basin. Of course, we are talking about, that in future by 2045, by 2060, they are likely to lose water because they are completely depending on the very Himalayan glaciers for their own, water, agriculture, the drinking water, food security, and also the hydel, the hydroelectric power we are talking about. 1/3 of electricity generation in India we are talking about. So this, the melting of snow mountains in the polar region, not only that, the third pole we call, the very Tibetan plate we are talking about, ultimately that causes some sort of, inundation and flooding ultimately. So that completely washes away. Sometimes the rivers getting, the shifting of its course, you might be aware, washing away hydroelectric projects, and people become highly vulnerable to this, disastrous event, and loss of lives, loss of livelihood also. We talk about everything. It's not only in the case of Himalayas, there is in general also in the Peruvian mountains, the Andes mountains we are talking about. So this particular thing, the melting of glaciers in the Himalayas, has long threatening the very energy security, because that. So if tell me the energy scenario of the nation or energy security of the nation, I will tell you the economic status of the nation. The same way as I speak, right? Tell me your EB bill, electricity bill. I'll tell you what's your economic status. So this is the time we have to think about, that, and given 1/3 of electricity through Hydel project, that too, that the glacier, Himalayan glacier dependent, energy security India has. Of course, we have to, that talk about, alternative, that route, and we have to, that work towards, that the very solar, the windmill that way. This is the time, and we have to, that get used to that, new kind of adaptation. And also, that as I said, food security, ladies and gentlemen, hitherto, it's supporting 2 billion population. Of course, that the yellow, that a river population is going to benefit more. Then we see anomaly also. On the one side, we see, that the Indo-Gangetic plain people may get severely affected, whereas, that the very yellow river region, that likely to get benefited more in the long run. So that also we see anomaly. And recently, what happened? The Chamoli, of course, the Uttarakhand disaster, Nanda Devi peak, where glacier melting, how it resulted. So we keep on talking about melting of glaciers, melting of glaciers. Why? It's because of global warming. The planet of the earth has become warmth. The melting of snow mountains, ultimately what happened? How it melts, you have to understand, because as I said, you have to understand the linkage. You might be already aware, ladies and gentlemen, we say global warming. Why? It's because of anthropogenic factor, man-made disaster. Otherwise, in the name of our refrigerator, that otherwise, the very air condition we are sitting now comfortably, and also automobile pollution, industrial pollution, everything, we add more carbon in the atmosphere. This ultimately makes holes in the ozone layer, part of stratosphere of atmosphere. That holes are allowing UV rays penetration, ultraviolet radiation, the penetration, you might be aware. When the ultraviolet rays, that reaches, falls on, the very, very, very polar regions, ultimately, that melts the snow mountain. We have to talk about. So it's on the one side, flooding, uncertainty, unpredictability, and disastrous events we are talking about. On the other side, rising of sea level. So because when the mean sea level rises because of the melting of all these snow mountains in the polar region, even the third pole, the very Tibetan, plateau we are talking about, what will happen? The sea level rise, mean sea level rise, because of that low-lying regions, that ultimately will get submerged. You might be aware. And that the very, the littoral states, the coastal nations, that they will lose their infrastructure, the population, the livelihood. And also, that very recently, the Maldives conducted, underwater, that the cabinet meeting, in a century, there may not be nations. For our irresponsible consumption, there are guys in the other end losing, they become stateless. And apart from that, it's not restricted to humanity alone. Think about other species. We're talking about that way. Ladies and gentlemen, this global warming, that ultimately what happened, that the very even ocean currents we talk about, cold currents, warm currents, that on the surface of the ocean, it's also, that shifting it, that there will be change in that particular pattern. You might be well aware when the cold current, warm current meeting, there, the situations will be very warm. That's good for, the planktons, survival. Ultimately, there, the largest fishing grounds in the world. The one third of the food supported by the marine resources, that's also that goes beyond our predictability, that affects the marine resources. We talk everything, ladies and gentlemen, threatening the food security we are talking about because of the global the warming, of course, climatic change. But our the discussion is going to be restricted to the melting of the human the very the Himalayan glaciers and its impact, the disastrous impact, energy security, threatening energy security and food security. Why the recent Uttarakhand disaster, the Nanda Devi peak and its melting, the flooding, and the human holocaust, that still, and two tunnels that the got that affected because of that, you might be aware, and washed away about very tapovan projects, hydroelectric projects we are talking about. Everything, ladies and gentlemen. Why the context? Of course, the very question came in 2020 and the resources to be consulted. We are going to talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you. Of course, I think we have given brief introduction about general studies, 60/40 ratio, the role in prelims, role in mains written, even in the interview. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to civil service examination preparation, ladies and gentlemen, one particular point you have to understand that there is a slogan: Jack of all, master of one. Jack of all segments of GS. You're not supposed to be a specialist. You're supposed to be a generalist. Jack of all, master of one. What is that master of one? The one subject, that's called your optional subject. Definitely there it's needed, specialized knowledge. That too, the syllabus will be between your UG degree and that and PG degree. Of course, honors level. You come to know, you just go through previous year question paper. So the moment it says you're going to be generals, where the role of general studies is very crucial, highly influential. 1,200 marks out of 2025. If you get 1,000 marks, you would have become IAS. You understand what I'm talking about? So that this general studies is capable of contributing to the tune of 1,200 marks. Ladies and gentlemen, please understand and work accordingly. That so it's not a hard work. It's not a donkey work. Of course, I practice environmental ethics parallel. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not belittling any that other species. It's not a donkey work. Rather, it is supposed to be hard work, smart work, effective work. Understand these nuances. Know your priorities too. Because it is scheduling your priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, when it comes to context, that this is what we said, ladies and gentlemen. What is this? So, how will the melting of Himalayan glaciers have far-reaching impact on the water resources in India? You just see how it's going to affect, the drainage system we are talking about. Maybe the Yellow River Basin may be benefited more out of that, but rest of the basins, whether it is Yangtze, whether it is Brahmaputra, the Indo-Gangetic, of course, you talk about Indus, that the Ganges, Yamuna, the entire system. Of course, what we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, that's negative. We are talking about there will be severe, highly vulnerable. We are talking about this is apart from the disastrous angle and threatening the very food security and also the energy security. We are talking about, of course. So this came prior to the recent incident, the Chamoli. Of course, Uttarakhand incident we are talking about. The question came 150 words, 10 marks. Ladies and gentlemen, by the time I finish my discussion, you will be more equipped. It's not only restricted to the water resources and also threatening food security and threatening energy security and disastrous, the man-made disasters, of course, the flooding, everything we are talking about, and washing away of the hydroelectric projects, of course, we say, and supporting the 2 billion population, they become vulnerable. So situation demands, that as to go for adaptation, a new kind of adaptation and alternative mechanisms when it comes to energy, when it comes to food resources, when it comes to water resources, in what way we are prepared. Of course, this is assessment, ladies and gentlemen. So it's not Sampath making statement in front of you. We got, research-based articles, to support the very view. We are talking about that way. Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. 1 second. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, because I cross-checked parallel. If anyone is witnessing problem because of this, you got it. Thank you, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Climatic change and melting of glaciers in the Himalayas. That is what the topic, ladies and gentlemen. We are centered around that particular topic. We know the impact. Yes, yes. The climatic change is driving glaciers in the Himalayas to melt more rapidly than at any point, at least 10,000 years, that the back, that the pace with which, the speed with which, that the very melting happens, that's what we are worried, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, that it could soon, the cause water supply shortage. This is what the recent 2020 question address. How the water resources, that likely to see the impact we are talking about in parts. It's not only restricted to India alone. As I said, linked with, the West Asia as well as South Asia. Of course, India, Pakistan, there may be two nations, but sharing, the common drainage system, of course, Indus, you might be aware. And beyond that, of course, you talk about Nepal, the very system, that ultimately. So researchers from Ohio State University in the US, they're talking about, showed the climatic change could have devastating effects on vulnerable residents. So that the people, that the 2 billion population depending on that particular, that the region, residing in that particular region, that cutting across variety of nations, say West Asia as well as, that it's not West Asia, Central Asia will be more appropriate term in my opinion. There is German, Afghanistan, the Tajikistan we are talking about, Central Asia as well as the South Asia we are talking about, devastating effects on vulnerable residents. It's not only restricted to the very Himalayas, also that the Andes mountains, even the Peruvian mountains, the Latin America we are talking about. But the third pole, what we are talking about, it's not only North Pole, South Pole, the third pole in the world, because of the billion tons of the ice that you witnessed in the Tibetan plateau. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, that this is to highlight, the very climatic change, the speed with which it happens, that, and also the its own impact on, that the water resources in the West, that Central Asia as well as South Asia, and also it's based on the Ohio State, the University of United States of America. The research, how the vulnerable the residents we are talking about, not only restricted to India, as I said, the Central Asia as well as South Asia, and also not only restricted to the very Himalayan region, what we are talking about. Also, that so in several parts of the world, like Peruvian, Latin America, and Andes mountains, we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. It is right time. Let me take you in. What is this? Ladies and gentlemen, this is, of course, that expert, Lonnie Thompson, a climate scientist, that Ohio State University, his statement. What is that statement? By, the 2100, the best case scenario is that half of the ice will disappear. That several research, that mentioning several time boundaries, that there are some people 2035 and, that 2045 and 2060. But according to, that Lonnie Thompson, the climate scientist of Ohio State University, we're talking about the worst case scenario. He says, what is that? The two-thirds of it will go off. Not only that, you got all those population depending on the glacier also. As I said, so that we are talking about out of 1.4 billion population, that the percentage varies, and overall you can say 2 billion population. Take it on the whole globe. Oh my God. So researchers showed that while water supply is declining, demand is rising because growing population. So hitherto, that you would have talked about, that the T.R. Malthus theory, the arithmetic ratio, arithmetic progression, geometric progression. You would have discussed that way. So when the population increases, that it's the food availability, the resources availability, not proportionate to that. Where we talk about positive checks, preventive checks. So that, population growth versus, the food availability. But this is about population growth versus, the water resources availability we are talking about. This is all new consciousness, that we are woken up to some extent, ladies and gentlemen, given global warming, given climatic change, and devastating effect we are talking about, the disastrous events happening in different parts of the world. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, let me take you to the next level. Yes, the glaciers. This is what clear-cut example. 2001, how the glacier was there in the Peru. The 2007, see how the ice sheet got reduced. 2009, the broken ice sheets has become two. The glaciers in Peru supply critically needed water for the people, crops, livestock. So it's for people drinking water as well as agriculture, as for the very animal cattle population depending on that agriculture and allied activities. You speak that way. So in 2016, of course, you might be aware, researchers from China and India launched an initiative. What is that initiative? To conduct similar research, the third pole of the world, housing the billion tons of ice called the Tibetan Plateau, which holds thousands of glaciers that supply water to the people in parts of, this is what we said, Afghanistan, Bhutan, China, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and also Tajikistan. But you understand, Central Asia, as well as that the countries of South Asia we are talking about. So thousands of glaciers, that supply water to the people. We are talking about part of this third pole, that the water towers of the world. We are talking about Tibetan Plateau. Ladies and gentlemen, you just see how the Peruvian, the glacier, that it's melting and shrinking. That's clear cut case we are talking about. So we said third pole. What is that? Tibetan Plateau. This plateau, yellow region we are talking about. So the international research team dubbed the plateau, the very Tibetan Plateau, as a third pole. Why? It's because of the fresh water, the billion tons of ice, because it contains the largest stores of fresh water. That's the point. In the world, this is outside, that both north and south poles, Arctic and Antarctic regions, what we are talking about. So that's why third pole we are talking about. So since then, they have drilled the ice core samples to understand across the Tibetan Plateau and Andes Mountains, and also examined ice for clues about the temperatures, air quality, and other large scale events in the history. Ladies and gentlemen, that research, this is what I said, Pakistan, India, of course, here you talk about, that of course, Afghanistan, then you talk about Tajikistan, then, that Indo-Gangetic plain we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, so Nepal, Bhutan, of course, the Brahmaputra basin we are talking about, and also, that this is Yellow River and Yangtze River. This is Indo-Gangetic plain. So the whole region completely, almost 2 billion population you are talking about, including China. That way, Irrawaddy, the river Irrawaddy, talk about here. That Irrawaddy, the Myanmar, of course, you talk about. It is general, right thing. I think it is right time, of course, So the very test, that examining the ice for clues about temperature, air quality, and other large-scale events in the history. Of course, that the very research went up that way. That. So it's not only that, ladies and gentlemen. The last 200 years or so, we really understand, that this issue. It's a force to reckon with. So of course, it is late realization. Now we are looking at the best, that last the 10,000 years, that of course we look back and connect with the events ultimately to get, more ideas, more understanding about this, so that to some extent, we can predict and we avert, and we can also, that adapt to the changes to some extent. Of course, the nature is the king ultimately, that invincible we are talking about. So there have been times throughout the history when, that even now I am doing, that man-made disaster, answer my contribution is what to do. So there have been times throughout the history when the global ice cores show temperatures in. The global ice core showed temperature increase during the El Nino. You might be aware, the very events, El Nino, La Nina, part of geography you would have gone through, how they are influencing the monsoon, why southwest monsoon is getting delayed. You might be aware. Ladies and gentlemen, so however, within the last century, the cores from both Andes and Himalayas show widespread and consistent warming. You're talking about last century. It is not restricted to 1 year, 2 year from. Of course, that's why it's called climatic. That's why it's called climatic change. So that it's taken into account over a large area for longer period of time. Of course, that's why it's not weather change. It's a climatic change. Hope you understand here. So this current warming, it's not a typical thing. It's a continuation. The consistent warming, what we've witnessed in the last century. That's what the very Thompson, the climate expert of Ohio State University of United States of America, speaks that way, ladies and gentlemen. And also, it's happening faster. And it is more persistent, and it is affecting the glaciers in both Peru, that Latin America, as well as Indus, the very Indian region. We are talking about Indian country, and it is this problem, that because a lot of people rely on those glaciers for their water resources. You understand? As we said, the Indus drainage, Brahmaputra drainage, the Indo-Gangetic plain, that of course, Ganges, Ganga, Yamuna, you're talking about. And also, that other side, of course, that the very China, the Yellow River, of course, Yangtze, even the very Myanmar, Irrawaddy. Yes, of course, the Brahmaputra, it begins with the name of Sangpo, you might be aware. The moment it enters India, it becomes Brahmaputra. And when it joins Ganga, it becomes Padma. You might be all those, ladies and gentlemen. So the melting glaciers can trigger such hazards. What is that? Avalanches and also floods. The flash flood we are talking about, avalanches, and completely taking, that the clearing everything. So the disastrous angle, you think, the think that way. So they also can save, that can have long lasting effects on the region's water supply. This is what the impact on water resources. Of course, that you parallelly meet 20 questions with that. As the glaciers, that melt, initially those regions will have more water, that when they, but what happened? So what happened over the days, that there will be the glaciers, there won't be water in that particular region. Maybe some other regions, getting benefited. Maybe there may be shift in the glacial farming also we are talking about. Yes, of course, that all, this is what we are talking about, climatic change, ladies and gentlemen. So however, unpredictability on the part of, that the parameters of, the climate or atmospheric phenomenon, and also the devastative effect we are talking about. That's what the global warming or climatic change. However, over the time, as the glaciers shrink, the water, that those glaciers, typically supply will dwindle. That's what we are talking about. Dwindle. So precipitation is down and temperatures are up. The global warming. Precipitation is down, but temperatures are up, and that leads to, that retreating glaciers. Of course, that increases the speed of, that the melting of the very snow mountains or glaciers you talk. But it's that way. So there are 202 million people in Pakistan who rely on water from Indus River. That there is Indus Treaty brokered by World Bank. You might be aware. Well. So that rivers, they're fed by the glaciers, ladies and gentlemen. You have to understand, that of course the India-Pakistan conflict, has got another dimension also. Because that you have to understand, yeah? They want land, but they don't want, the water. They want water. They're not ready to. Of course, it has got its own two sides of arguments. That's a different story. That's centered around Jammu Kashmir. Of course, we recently abrogated Article 370 to consolidate one nation, one system. There you got northeastern state. Of course, Article 371A. That's a different story. Ladies and gentlemen, it is right time. Let me go back. Yes, the effects, the very effects what we are talking about in Peru, Latin America too, would be far-reaching. The impact will be far, particularly on Peruvian agriculture, the Peruvian agriculture and the water supply, Peru, capital, Lima, and the Peruvian, the capital, we are talking about agriculture and water supply, the Lima, we are talking about, the cities, it's not only irrigating, that agriculture, the rural belt, and also, that supplying good, the potable drinking water to urban, the centers, of course, as Sardar Sarovar Dam, how it, supports, very Ahmedabad, you might be aware. Of course, but each and every dam project is not from criticism. And also, the very seismological region, over which it's built, exerting pressure, and so many things we are talking about. So several angles, ladies and gentlemen. So researchers are hoping that by studying, the glaciers in both areas, they will find answers, to slow glacial retreat and to provide new water resources, that to at-risk areas, and also they will give, these are all vulnerable areas, that in what way we should be prepared enough, so as to meet these challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way. So it affects agriculture, it affects, that the water resources, it affects, that food security, it affects the energy security, and this all these things, apart from disastrous angle and human holocaust and loss of life and livelihood. And ladies and gentlemen, that way, of course, that this is throwing, more light, that of course we are talking about. It is that way. Of course, Indus, the Ganges, the Koshi, the Brahmaputra, the Irrawaddy, and Salvan, and Yangtze, the Mekong, the Yellow River, and of course, you talk about, the Tathari, and you talk about, the very Amudharya. So, it's almost Central Asia, South Asia, and including, this is the thing, that the greatest water drainage systems the world we are talking about. This is apart from the rest of the things. I'm not talking about Amazon or Nile here. It's totally, or Danube. I'm not talking about those here, that restricted to, that Central Asia as well as, that South Asia we are talking about. Yes, the global warming is reducing our, the resources all around and making life more dangerous along the way, perilous. The rivers of the Himalayas, of course, are just one more, the example we are talking about, that how vulnerable they are. A new report, it's not only new, and also seismic even happened in the past, mind earthquake, and also the Kedarnath 2013, that the very flooding, you're well aware of this. So a new report has warned that even if global warming is held at 1.5 degrees Celsius, ladies and gentlemen, we will still lose a third of the glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. We are talking about this very region, Hindu Kush Himalaya region. We are talking about that way also. So one third of the glaciers we are likely to lose to just this particular Hindu Kush Himalaya region. We are talking about, of course, ladies and gentlemen, this particular thing we are talking about. I think it is right time. Let me take you. The Hindu Kush Himalaya region is a home to the tallest mountains of the earth. That all those that the very Mount Everest, the Karakoram, the Goodwin Austin, everything. What do you call? That everything, and also the Nanda Devi Peak. Where we are talking about the recent the flash flood and melting of that and that too, the beginning of Himalayas we are talking about, the Uttarakhand. So, and also to the source of the rivers that sustain almost 2 billion population. Ladies and gentlemen, you understand? 2 billion population that sustain because of that. So these rivers supply agriculture with water and with sediments. That it supply agriculture with water and also sediments. That all those the broken pieces of that the rocks. Of course, you get even the very alluvial soil formation you're talking about, the very Indo-Gangetic plain. It's because of that. The erosion, the continuous erosion and water bed formed. We're talking about the sediments, that they become, that they ultimately fertilize the very soil. Natural manure we are talking about. So in the river run course we are talking about, in the valleys and also in the floodplain we are talking about, the Ganga Yamuna Doab we talk about. And it's possible because of the largest alluvium soil there. Even the Kaveri river belt we are talking about. The Krishna, Godavari, Kaveri, Palar, South Penna river system, and Narmada, Tapti there, yes. The very alluvial soil. Of course, otherwise the sediments that fertilize, the soils in the valley and floodplain we are talking about. So the very purpose of rivers, that not only that, the rivers are called, cradles of civilization. Even the Indus Valley civilization, all those, the Mesopotamia, the Euphrates, Tigris, you hear. All those greatest civilizations survived on the banks of rivers. That's why Indus Valley civilization, the first urban civilization in India, you talk about, ladies and gentlemen. So rivers are called, cradles of civilization. This is apart from that I'm talking about, whether it is water transportation or supporting people for livelihood, or water resources or agriculture, and also everything, the livestock maintenance. Yes, so some of these rivers are hugely, the culturally significant we are talking about. That Gangama bol raha hu, Gangama bulare, that that people, the religious pilgrimages, the Allahabad, the Prayag, the confluence of rivers, the Alkananda river, Bhagirathi river, you hear everything, right? So that even Kaveri, Adiperukku, South India, it's very famous. Of course, we are talking about. So it is that way. Some of these rivers are hugely culturally significant. So lifestyle, which has got linked with lifestyle. So the Ganges or Ganga, you call for instance, which flows for more than 2,525 the kilometer. It's a lifeline almost like. Got the idea? No? It's a lifeline. So heartline, almost heartbuilt. So from the western Himalayas to the Bay of Bengal, we are talking about, is personified, that in Hinduism as goddess Ganga, Gangama. It's that way, that we are talking about, how the pollution getting cleaned. You might be aware. So the several Supreme Court judgments, that related to that, that even how the Allahabad, the Kumbh Mela, everything, even the Uttar Pradesh administration for appreciated for that, the management, the people's management, mass management. So it is that way we are talking about, and also the cleaning of, the very the river appreciated that way. That's fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to appreciate several measures relevant to that. So when it rains, it pours literally the Himalayas. It pours literally. There's some song also, some old song. Or some maybe pouring continuous, maybe old song I believe. When I was kid, I heard that song. So when it rains, it pours literally. So for much of the Himalayas, the rain falls mostly during the monsoon. That between June and September, you might be aware. The June and September, of course, June, South India, of course, onset of monsoon. You talk. So the rain falls, that mostly during the monsoon. That's active between June and September. You got India, of course, that the gambling of monsoon. Indian agriculture is otherwise called gambling of monsoon. So southwest monsoon, because of that, we receive more rainfall, and also northeastern monsoon. That's benefiting Tamil Nadu. The mangrove showers you would have heard about, and otherwise, Tamil Nadu, especially the Chennai, becomes that great bath, disastrous December, but the Delhi becomes gas chamber. November, December, Chennai becomes, that great bath of Mohenjo-daro Lake. Of course, we are talking about. So the monsoon brings, heavy rain. Disastrous angle, I said. That's all. So the monsoon brings heavy rain and often causes devastating floods. Heavy rain and devastating floods we are talking about. Such as northern India, the 2013, the Kedarnath. You would have aware of this. Ultimately, that forces people to, that evacuate themselves from that particular vulnerable region. Almost 1,10,000 people. The internal displacement, otherwise you call that way. I know that when I say internal displacement, even Pandit Nehru built a lot of, that during his tenure. Several plannings, the temples of modern India, the dams built you talk about. The other side of the coin, internal displacement happened in India because of the building of dams. Rehabilitation, Resettlement Act we are talking about today. People got displaced from one region to another region because of that. It's a government encouragement. Otherwise, it is that way. So internal displacement. So, but the summer monsoon is not only the culprit. That is not the only culprit for devastation floods. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand. That it's not simply blaming the summer monsoon. You have to understand even winter monsoon, the heavy rain we are talking about. So we are talking that way, ladies and gentlemen. And landslides, can dam the river. It stop. It may change the course. And when this dam bursts, it can cause dramatic, unpredictable floods, flash floods, everything we are talking about. You would have seen a lot of, the TV news, that several things happen. And some of those events, that have been linked to folk stories. The folk stories of, the floods and many cultures, that are around the world. It's not a new phenomenon, the persist. That's what I'm talking about. A century old, that it's, but the speed with which, the pace with which, the melting happens, the glacier melting happens in the Himalayas. So that's what, the alarming, the situation. It's a warning we're talking about, and the frequency with which it happens. Yes. So in the Himalayas, the study tracking of 1,000-year, the history of large floods we're talking about showed that the heavy rainfall and landslide, dam burst are the main causes we're talking about. That way. So it is a 1,000-year history of large floods we are talking about. Heavy rainfall and landslide and also dam burst are the main causes. The disastrous angle we are talking about. This is apart from, threatening food security, energy security, and impact on water resources and livestock, agriculture. Wow, it is that way, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you understand that way. I think it is right time. Let me take you to the next level. What is that? When they melt, when the glaciers melt, the glaciers can also create natural dams. What happened, right? They melt. You can't stop the force, natural force. Ultimately, they come and settle. They create lakes also sometimes. And I know that they create, and filling the valleys, ultimately making, dams like structure, so which can then burst and send floods down the valley. So they create some sort of natural dam structure, then burst and sending floods. What happened? Tapovan, the hydroelectric, you would have watched live videos. Thanks to technology, you might be aware. In this way, the newly forecast, melting poses a severe, the threat, acute threat we are talking about. So the melting poses, that acute threat, dangerous, alarming situation, perilous we are talking about. So the potential problem is worsened still further by, that of course, the very interpanel, the intergovernment panel on climatic change prediction we are talking about, that of course, once again. Of course, that IPCC we are talking about, Intergovernmental Panel on Climatic Change, the prediction, that World Meteorological Organization, even it has been awarded Nobel Prize, you might be aware. It's that way. Nobel laureate, you call, that Nobel Prize awarded institution, that the frequency of extreme rainfall events, will also increase. So that's what we are talking about, the frequency with which we are talking about, unpredictability, the vulnerability, the potential problem, the dangerous situation. It's exacerbated, it's getting worsened we are talking about. That IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climatic Change, also, the prediction, its prediction, the frequency of extreme rainfall events, that it's going to increase, will also increase. That's the point we are very much worried. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, of course, that what will happen to, Himalayan rivers when the taps are, that turned to high in this way. It is, that, so what will happen to Himalayan rivers when the taps are turned to high this way? It's almost like, opening the tap water, the force with which it comes like that, it's, so for tens of thousands of years, rivers have polished the rocks. It is that the erosion, water erosion, ultimately the pebbles, everything what you see, the granules, and even that's getting reduced to, the sand bits, of course, we are talking about. So polished rocks and laid down, the very sediments in the lower valleys we are talking about. So, that in of the, of the mountain range, the Himalayan mountain range, of course, the Ganga Yamuna Dove, that ultimately the great alluvium soil fertilizing, the valley, the very, very, the plains we are talking about. So these sediments and rocks, they tell us story of how the river behaves when the tap closes, almost like that. The Himalayan tap opens and closes, tap opens and closes, like that way. The perennial, all perennial rivers of the North India originating from there, otherwise called third pole. We are talking about, almost supporting 2 billion population. What is that? The Tibetan plate we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way. The greatest drainage system, the Tibetan plate we are talking about here. It is that region, third pole in the world. This is after Arctic and Antarctic region with billion tons of, the glaciers and its melting we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the right time. Let me take you to the next level. Once again. Some experts, propose that intense, that rain tends to trigger landslides. Intense rain might be a bit, trigger landslides, even, everywhere you would have witnessed, and choking the river with sediments. What will happen? So ultimately, that inundation happens. That it goes out of that, all the banks, will be flooded ultimately. That impacts, as I said, the rivers are cradles of civilization. People got settled on the banks ultimately. And ultimately, mudslinging, a lot of things, that, so which are, and that too, you see the Himalayan region, the very slanting, the slope like structure ultimately, and the slanting, that ultimately has got impact on residents, and, that washing away of, hydroelectric projects, as I said, that region housing 1/3 of the electricity generation there. So though, though it was, that against the advice of, the environmental activists and people like, Sundarlal Bahuguna, Chipko movement already advised that's a seismic zone. You should not exert more stress, that by building dams, all those stuff. But in spite of that, that we ignored and we are paying price for that, and which are then, that dumped in the valley. Others suggest that supply of sediments, that to the river generally doesn't change much, even in the extreme rainfall events, and that the main effect of extra flow is that the river, that erodes further into bed. So, that as long as it is regular, it's not a problem. That the moment you open the tap, the fully, what will happen, the force with which it comes, that extra flow, that's the main effect we are talking about, that river erodes further into bed. We are very much worried about it. That's what, we are talking about. For that, the speed with which and frequency with which the melting happens, melting of, the glaciers in the Himalayan region happens there, we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, that way. So the most recent work, that supports, that of course, this theory one we are talking about. So more flow or extra flow, because of that only we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you to the next level. Yes, it is found, the 25,000 to 35,000 years ago, when the monsoon was much weaker than today, sediments were, that filling up Himalayan valley. We're talking about sediments were filling up. We are talking about, of course, the very Indo-Gangetic valley you talk about. Of course, this, the drainage system, the Indo-Gangetic plains you talk about. Indus, the Ganges, Yamuna, Brahmaputra, the basin you're talking about. But more recently, of course, it is recent in the sense 3,000 to 6,000 years ago. So the very rock surfaces were, that exposed during the period of, strong monsoon we are talking about, and illustrating how rivers, otherwise river carved into, its bed in response to the higher, otherwise the very river formation, its course, and the plain formation, everything is linked with this. We are talking about the erosion, the wind erosion you call, the same way it is called, water erosion, the river erosion, that it is that way, ladies and gentlemen. So what does the past tell us about the future of Himalayan rivers? You can also, talk to me that way. The future of Himalayan rivers, when this is a scenario, when that all rivers, that the water resources are likely to be dwindled, and given, that on the one side, population rise, on the other side, the glaciers are melting. Just see, disastrous angle, threatening food security, threatening energy security, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, the more frequent extreme rainfall events, that mean more floods, of course. The unpredictability, that's what, part of global warming. That's because of global warming. That's because of the climatic change, unpredictability of monsoon, all those, parameters of, atmosphere we are talking about. But a stronger monsoon also means, the rivers will cut deeper. It will get, go very deeper into their beds instead of fertilizing the Himalayan valleys. That's also quite dangerous. We're talking about. And the Indo-Gangetic, plain with sediments we are talking about. It is that way. It's not really sediment formation, as I said in the beginning, right? Extra flow, that it's cutting the very river into deeper beds we are talking about. So, in that sense, that, then what about glacier melting? All these things because of the glacier melting only. We are talking about more flow of, water. You just see how the natural dam, like, the formation we are talking about, how they are making, that artificial lakes ultimately. See how it creates, all this situation, ladies and gentlemen. For as long as there are, the glaciers, this will increase the amount of, the melt water in the rivers each spring we are talking about. Of course, that's what several research, giving, different, time boundaries anyway, until 2060 according to the report, after which, there won't be any melt water to talk about. There won't be glaciers at all. There will be open mountains that you are going to see without glaciers. That's what the point. So it's an alarming situation. But according to some other researchers, 2035, 2045 people are talking about. Oh my God. So this too will contribute to, that rivers carving into their beds instead of distributing, the sediments. The river, ultimately what happened, you talk about, it is that way. It will have its own, river bed. It is this way we are talking about. Artificial lakes will be created. Then that's also dangerous. So it will also increase the risk of flooding from outburst of glacial, that like dams, the glacial lake dams. It's not like dams, lake dams, glacial lake we are talking about. It is that way, that these creations. So that changes the face of the geography, topography there we are talking about, and see the impact on people and their livelihood we are talking about. So given thousands or millions of years, it seems likely that they will, that one day return. Got the point now? But on a more meaningful human time scale we are talking about. But that what is really at stake is our own survival, ladies and gentlemen. That it is that way. Nature becomes invincible. So nobody can win over the nature. It is that way, ladies and gentlemen. So the disastrous, that angle, that cited here, ladies and gentlemen, it is that way. Let me take you to the next level. What is that? Climatic change has a strong influence, that on the precipitation over the Himalayas, as well as melting response of the glaciers or snow cover of the Himalayas we are talking about. That way. The influence is because of the climatic change. The several factors attributed to this you might be well aware. So I think it is right time, let me discuss that how this melting of glaciers in the Himalayas, so threatening the very energy security, the energy that moves the nation. Of course, we are taking several alternative energy resources, wind, solar, of course, that even biofuel we are talking about. This is apart from the civilian nuclear cooperation, we want to explore more through nuclear energy, ladies and gentlemen. And what about this? That the very hydroelectric, that electricity we generate, because of that, the river flow we're talking about, which is also not free from issues or disastrous angles. So this in turn affects the runoff pattern of rivers draining from the glaciated catchments of the Himalayas. We are talking about it is getting disturbed, the melting response, getting disturbed ultimately. It's that way, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking that way, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take you to the next level. So three major river catchments, along with several tributaries. The tributaries, the river comes and joins the river. Distributaries, the river gets separated from the main river. Tributaries, distributaries. Let me speak this. A river joins tributaries. The river goes out of it. Distribute. We're talking about. No, this is tributary. This is a distributary. Might be aware. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, so three major river catchments, along with that several tributaries originating from India as well as Nepal, part of Himalayas, receive significant contribution. That of course, you might be aware already. That this is my, I think, that responsibility to share with you once again. It is that way. So, that especially from the cryo means, that low temperature physics, the cryogenic, the technology would have heard, the Himalayan cryosphere, and especially during, that non-rainfall, that lean period of the year. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So, the three major river catchments, along with their several the tributaries, that we are talking about. I think you got this. So, these rivers support the life and livelihood of more than 500 million people. We are talking about. Wow. Living, the downstream in the Indo-Gangetic plains, but also support several industries, located in these, the plains we are talking about. The food processing industries and several industries that needed more water, that for their own, the purpose, of course, we are talking about. It's a late realization, the marine, of course, it's got, that otherwise, the water. We're talking about Maripur. It's almost, the water budget. Nowadays, we've got this particular consciousness. So we never thought about it. As I told you, right, several countries, especially developed countries, already realize, that they're losing their scarce resources. That's why they are dumping the production they try to carry out in developing countries. Even recently, China stopped producing oranges because, every product behind which you have to take into account the water consumption. In making a gene, in making, the 1 kg of, the wheat, how much water, 500 liters we are talking about. If you calculate that water, otherwise, that you won't enter into agriculture also. So this is late realization, the scarce resources we are likely to lose because of the, global warming or climatic change. First, that we have to take measures, the desalinization that we have to do, because we got, you know very well, the water, the 70% of, that the part of the earth, the surface water. And, there should be refined technology in terms of desalinization projects, low cost also, probably to support all these things we are talking about. So, it's part of, that alternative strategies we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, simultaneously, Himalayan rivers are also responsible for ensuring energy security of the country. That's what we are mentioning. That's getting threatened. How? Due to their role in supporting both, the production of both hydro as well as thermal electricity in that region. So you've got, that electricity generation happening in that particular region, that through dams and power plants, ultimately, in that, Indo-Gangetic plain, that it's otherwise 1/3 of the country's electricity, what we are talking about. 1/3 of the production capacity is located in these Indo-Gangetic plain. That is what we are talking about. So, and any variability in the flow pattern of either the very Himalayan rivers can have far-reaching impact. The consequences we are talking about for the energy security of the nation. You have to understand. So even recently, the Nanda Devi peak, the glacier melting, the Uttarakhand, the Chamoli, in what way, the Tapovan, project completely washed away. You watched that, the TV news, video, everything. It is in German. You're talking that way. So this study tries to correlate the impacts of climatic change on the energy security of the country. The impact of, the climatic change on the energy security of the country by studying, the water footprints of, the energy production in the country and the available literature and the variability of, that the meltwater in the Himalayan region. They're talking about that way, ladies and gentlemen. So the study recommends that the focus, that of policy making on renewable energy, focus of policy making on renewable energy. That's what we are talking about. Renewable energy resources like, the solar, windmill we are talking about. They should have equal impetus. They should be given, more, the initiatives in that particular direction we are talking about on reducing the water, footprints of electricity. This is how, what is the way forward we are talking about. So let's decrease the dependence on water footprints, or hydroelectric generation. They're talking about, and river valley specific plans are required, to generate adaptation plans, for energy projects in the country. These are all the things we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, this is almost like, way forward, given impact, given threatening, the energy security of the nation, and also reducing our that dependency on water footprints we are talking about for electricity production. That's very important. So, and also some more recommendations we have to discuss from various that research based organizations. How do they tackle, if you ask me, ladies and gentlemen? One second. That's enough. Hope my video and audio is very clear, ladies and gentlemen. Change, please tell me. Right. So, what the recommendations? Several recommendations also we can discuss. In what way we can come out of this, threatening of energy security scenario. So, there is a high interdependence between glaciers located in Himalayas and energy security. We established now one third almost. So, almost 33% of country's thermal electricity and 52% of hydropower we are talking about is dependent on water from the rivers originating in Himalaya. So this is all the thing we would like to that postulates otherwise the recommendations that so these rivers receiving significant part of their water due to melting of the ice or glaciers making an indispensable part of India's energy. So when they are dwindling, when they are receding, when they are retreating, when they are ultimately that nowhere by 2060, you just imagine the situation. So that it is that way. It's questioning the very our own survival we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, and survival of agriculture, survival of livestock, the loss of livelihood, ladies and gentlemen. So, and reducing water footprints. What you have to do, reducing water footprints of the energy utility. That's what we discussed. Let's reduce the dependency on water resources. There should be integrated water storage policy in such a way. It's not simply allowed to that go and mix with the ocean water bodies. In what way it can be done to store those scarce resources? It's ultimately that increasing the groundwater table and maybe useful for our future conservation, of course, consumption too. So developing a comprehensive understanding of the very status of the very Himalayan glaciers. Of course, several research should be initiated, and what India has has done, we are going to look at that way also. And promotion of research on Himalayan glaciers, we are talking about more research should be initiated in this way. And glacier, which is said to be the source vulnerability, that otherwise that we are talking about, the vulnerability assessment can be carried out in that way, especially that vis-a-vis the hydropower plants we are talking about. Yes. So these are all the recommendations, ladies and gentlemen. Not only that, watershed management by the energy utilities, that as we spoke, and integrated river water basin management to rejuvenate, to revive the water potential we are talking about. And also that assessment of the glacial lake outburst flood we are talking about, as happened recently, and its potential, and also that adapting to the new changes as we. So just it's otherwise establishing joint coordination committee cutting across the various segments, that especially for water and energy, so preserving water resources, and also that ensuring the sustainability of that energy or energy security, ensuring energy security, so that you avert all those the Holocaust or the disastrous situations or dangerous situations, ladies and gentlemen. Not only that, so of course that you understand one third of that electricity, and recommendations also we speak about, and also in what way it's threatening the food security, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have to speak something. So this is, you just see how the melting, you are standing here, you imagine this. So the melting, how it comes. Oh my God. So the melting of glaciers in the Himalayas will have varying impact on the waters of so the Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Yangtze, Yellow rivers. And this is according to that new Dutch research report we are talking about. Not only that, scientists believe that the changes that the flow of water due to global warming may have severe impact on food security. Not Sampath speaking in front of you. It's based on Dutch research we are talking about. Dutch people talk about, Dutch Holland. So the very threatening of food security we are talking about. They also point out the people living elsewhere are likely to see an increasing food productivity. Of course, the yellow region, that yellow river region, the China is likely to get. On the one side, that all the immediate rivers of the very Himalayan foothills, that they may lose the water resources, but the somewhere people living somewhere likely to see increase in food productivity. Of course, yellow region of China we are talking about. So overall, food security of 4.5% of 1.4 billion people in the region is threatened. That we spoke about, almost 2 billion, the energy security we are talking about. Here, 4.5% of 1.4 billion population of India, we are talking about almost, is threatened. The very food security is threatened. So the lives of more than 1.4 billion people are dependent on water resources. Almost 2 billion we spoke in the beginning. So especially, as I said, Central Asia as well as South Asia, Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Yangtze, Yellow, Irrawaddy, Salween. We spoke at length, that, ladies and gentlemen, you are aware. Not only that, even the very journal, the science journal we are talking about, and it's a report. The BBC also quoted that, the science journal, that especially, the team from Netherlands, that they wrote, that an article in the journal called Science, that, and especially highlighting this issue. We show that, that the meltwater is extremely important in the Indus Basin and important, for the Brahmaputra Basin we're talking about. But only plays, modest role in Ganges and Yangtze River. Ganges, Yangtze and Yellow River. So the meltwater is extremely, given the, the population, they're getting supported by that. The Indus region and Brahmaputra region is very, very important when it comes to, that the meltwater from, the glaciers, of course, we are talking about when comparing with other drainage system, the Ganges, Yangtze, Yellow, and even Irrawaddy, the Salween we are talking about. So it's not me saying, the BBC quoted as if, the team from Netherlands, that whose article, the journal Science. So the Brahmaputra and Indus basins are most susceptible to reductions of flow, vulnerable to the reductions of flow. Because why? The ice sheet, that shrinking, the glaciers are shrinking in the Himalayas, not only in Himalayas, even the Peruvian mountains of, the Latin America, even the Andes mountain we are talking about. So that's threatening the food security of estimated 60 million people. And their food security is getting threatened. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, that it's not simply we speak somewhere like that. Research proves all mountains, the Himalayan mountains especially said to be the water towers of the world. As I said, all largest river basins of the world, that around that, the very Tibetan plate, which is otherwise called the third pole of the world because of, it's housing the billion tons of ice, the freshwater resources we are talking about. Snow and glacial melt are important hydrological process, no doubt, yes. And changes in temperature and precipitation also expected seriously, that affect the melt characteristics. The change in temperature, of course, linked with global warming, that influences precipitation parallelly, unpredictability, the rainfall, the monsoon. Of course, the Yellow River in particular, that shows consistent increase in the early spring discharge. We are talking about, that. So consistent increase in the Yellow River of China we witnessed, we are talking about. And also the very region likely to benefit more in terms of food security we are talking about. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, yes, it is right time. Let me take you to the next level. So this is highly beneficial we are talking about because most reservoirs are empty at the beginning of a growing season. So, that way, an accelerated melt, the peak may thus alleviate shortage of irrigation water in the drought-prone early stages of growing season. We are talking about, that drought-prone area may get benefited because of that. It is that way. So, some regions are getting affected. Some other regions are, getting benefited also in terms of water resources and food security. We are talking about that's, the anomaly. It's not uniform throughout the region. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, and also, that in spite of the compensating effects of increased rainfall in the Indus and Brahmaputra basin, the team believes the summer and late spring, discharges will be eventually come down. We are talking about how consistently and considerably by 2046. See, you understand? This is the Dutch, that report we are talking about, as reported by BBC. The articles written by the team of, Netherlands people. Especially, you talk about the science journal we are talking about. So by 2046 to 2065, after a period with increased flows as a result of accelerated glaciers, we are talking about eventually. So all this, discharges eventually will dip consistently and considerably. We are talking about. So it's alarming situation, ladies and gentlemen. That. So there is a saying in Tamil, that "Neerindri ammayadu uladu." No water, no life. What you're going to search, on the surface of, that even the very Mars, is there any water? Is there any ice patches on Moon? That's what you're talking about. Chandrayaan, ice patches. Water is available, life forms available. What a very precious resource we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So it is that way. So what happened ultimately, the very team, the research team also wants, what is that? They anticipate the anticipated changes. These anticipated changes will also have considerable effects on food security. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about considerable effects on food security we are talking about. So by relating changes in the upstream water availability, yeah, because upstream, so the next to Himalayan foothills, we are talking about upstream water availability to net irrigation, the requirements, observed crop yields and calorific value of the crops, and required human energy consumption. We are talking about consumption, and one can estimate the change in number of the people that it can feed, that can be fed. We are talking about. So definitely that in how extent the population can be supported by this. But the change in the upstream, that it is upstream we are talking about here. So upstream, this particular region, upstream water availability to the net irrigation requirements. At the source itself, that it's dwindling. You just see the impact on. And variety of factors you take into account here: the crop yield, calorific value of the crops, and the required energy, that for human consumption. Yes, see, in that way you can calculate, that the very impact. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the team's estimates, ladies and gentlemen, 34.5 million, the fewer people could be fed in the Brahmaputra basin. We are talking about this region. 26.3, that million, that in the Indus basin we are talking about, the Indus basin, and 7.1 million the Yangtze region we are talking about. Of course, the Indus region, this region. This is Yangtze, China region, and about 2.1 million, that around Ganges. This is how much population, the region wise, basin wise, getting supported because of this. The Himalayan glaciers, that supported, the river drainage system. So especially around, that this, third pole of the world called, the Tibetan Plateau. The mountains are otherwise called, that's why the water towers in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, do you understand? It is that way we are talking about. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we are simply discussing how this melting of glaciers in the Himalayas threatening the food security, and how making, the people in that particular region very vulnerable, and also the agriculture, the livestock, everything we are talking about. So, but they also suggest the changes could witness an increase in food production in the yellow. It is other way around. When all these regions are, that where you see the impact, alarming situation, but this particular region, that speaks other way around. The more water flow, more food productivity. So sufficient to feed another 3 million people. So here you see the increase in food production. So when all these regions are in one tone, that in one, that particular stand, so this stands in anomaly. The yellow river we are talking about, the yellow river basin, otherwise, which is sufficient to feed, that another 3 million people. That's fantastic, the positive, a blessing in disguise. Of course, but majority of the population getting affected here. That's different. So in total, we estimate that the food security of 4.5% of the total population will be threatened as a result of reduced water availability. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, 4.5% of the total population. We talk about that way when all the regions are showing one particular result. The yellow river, showing the increase in food productivity or increasing, the water availability in the region. That's anomaly. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is right time. What is the way forward? Okay, sir. Yes, alarming, threatening, yeah, vulnerability, unpredictability according to interpanel government on climatic change. That's fantastic. What is the way forward? Yes, the strong need for prioritizing adaptation options. Now, how to survive? Even origin of species, the Charles Darwin speaks that way. It is not the most strongest or intelligent species that survives. A species has the capacity or ability to adapt to change that survives. Because change is constant, as said by Karl Marx too. மாறாதது மாற்றம் ஒன்றுதான். Change is permanent, change is constant, ladies and gentlemen. So that if you are not adapting to the changes, even as a civil servant, when you are civil service aspirant, when your preparation, what we are expecting out of you, update your knowledge. Even as a teacher, as educator, you have to update. You don't update your knowledge, you will be thrown out. Ever learning syndrome, we are talking about it. Same way here, that this particular situation prompts us, expects us, that to adopt, prioritizing adoption options and our dependency towards water resources, various recommendations we have seen. And think, the exploring alternative energy resources, that the solar, windmill, biofuel, even they're talking that way. Is that way. So, and further increase in water productivity. They're talking about increase in water productivity. We are talking about, so therefore, even that more imminent. So conservation measures should be in such a way. So that makes our consumption pattern, that humble, responsible, accountable, answerable. That it is that way. Water conservation measures we have to work out it that way. So that we never contribute, that to the global warming further. It is that way. So Asia's water towers, are threatened by the climatic change. Asia's water towers, Asia's mountains, otherwise, threatened by the climatic change. But the effects of climatic change on water availability and food security in the Asia differ substantially among basins and cannot be generalized. As I said, from Indus to Brahmaputra region, of course, it is dwindling by 2065. But whereas Yellow River, we talk about increasing food resources and food security. 3 million additional people can be supported by that. So all regions, showing one particular trend except Yellow River basin we are talking about. So water availability and food security that differs, among the basins that cannot be generalized. That's the meaning, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about, I think, it is right time. Let me take you to the next one. The way forward speaks, not really that way. So the effects in Indus and Brahmaputra basins are likely to be severe owing to the large population, or due to the large population and high dependence on irrigated land and meltwater, because the Indo-Gangetic Plain, DOAB you are talking about. But whereas in the Yellow River, the climatic change may even yield a positive benefit. That's what we are discussing now. See the anomaly? What is that? As a dependence of meltwater is low. They depend, already what we recommended as one of the points, they started practicing here. What is that? So their dependency on water resources low and projected increased upstream precipitation. We are talking about and projected increased upstream. Here we expect more water resources also. And when the retained in reservoirs, that we talk about would enhance water availability for irrigated agriculture and food security. Got the idea? Na? From Indus to Brahmaputra region, one trend. Yellow River showing another trend. We are talking about it is that way. So you see in action. Not only that, I think that why we are talking. Of course, that context we established because 2020 question that came. That one question about melting of glaciers and its impact on water resources. But the recent disaster in Uttarakhand, what happened? This is what. So India's, Uttarakhand, the state you talk about. So this state is elaboration here, this red color, and how it began. The glacier burst in Rainy village, this particular region. In Rainy village of Chamboli in Garhwal Himalayas, which damages, hydropower plant, the National Thermal Power Corporation, Tapovan we are talking about, and several bridges and nearby villages we are talking about. So from this region to it flows like that. You understand? It is that way. What is this? And also, this second position, what we are talking about, a swollen Dhauli Ganga flows down to Vishnu Prayag. It is because of that inundation, that the more flooding. Of course, this third place, the river Alkananda at this point washes away under construction. That what is that project? Tapovan Vishnugad. That's what you see in several videos. You would have seen already. The hydropower, project on Rishi Ganga we are talking about. And also the stream, that now reaches, the very Srinagar here. Then, that you talk about Deva Prayag, that ultimately. Then ultimately, the Rishikesh here, Haridwar here. You just see how the flow, that this is, of course, that the beginning of Himalayas we are talking about. The melting of Nada Devi, the peak here, of course, Uttarakhand, that this is how the path. Ladies and gentlemen, you understood. It is that way. It's a trail of destruction, otherwise, what we are talking about. So loss of life, loss of livelihood, loss of, the power projects too, the flash flood we are talking about, and a new landscape, that it's because of that. It's a worrisome scenario we are talking about. Of course, there'll be several, that in the future also, because, it's linked to global warming and climatic change, So this is linked with, the recent happening, and, the two tunnels got, of course, that the filled with mud, you might be aware, and several people got stuck, several dead bodies recovered, and, that the thanks, that let's stand, that let's support. This is the right time. We express our deep condolence to the loss of lives of those people, and also, that we have to salute the people, NDRF, SDRF, and that Indo Bhutan, Tibetan police, and fire rescue officials, and hope the concerned state and central government working more in this direction. Well. And also Uttarakhand, that the glacier burst should prompt, that a review of how Himalaya, the very Himalayas should be treated. That this is, that we have to understand, that the depth, the gravity of the situation. See how the gushing water, the force with, oh my God, just see the habitations, that the projects here. Oh my God, the staggering collapse of the part of glacier in the Uttarakhand's, Nanda Devi mountain and the ensuing floods that have climbed, we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, that have climbed, that many lives, that come as, the deadly reminder that this fragile and geologically dynamic region we are talking about, it's a very dynamic region, geologically speaking. You see, not only geography, geologically. Dynamic region, that it's the very topic what we are discussing related to, that disaster management, of course, part of environmental science, linked with, the geography, where you talk about, global warming, climatic change, and also environmental science, linked with Indian economy, because the very impact on, the food security, threatening energy security, and also linked with your current affairs. You understand? So the 2020 question came prior to this, the incident, what we are talking about, but it's not a new phenomenon. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2 to 3 decades, several researchers going on, that including what I spoke in the beginning, Ohio State University, and also, that a Dutch review, and that the climate expert like Thompson, and several people, and we are going to, that link with, that Indian case study also parallel, ladies and gentlemen. And it is this situation, we have to wake up to this dangerous scenario. We should not, take the nature for granted, that you have to understand. Otherwise, we are taught lessons like this continuous. Ladies and gentlemen, that makes us, that our consumption pattern, that a responsible one, or answerable one. See how the people, lost their lives, that, getting rescued here. You just see a significant slice of the glacier, that dislodged by, that a landslide, and according to some satellite images we are talking about, and which produce, that roaring torrents, that we talk about, where the Rishi Ganga and Dauli Ganga rivers in Chamoli district, Uttarakhand. That's what we are talking about, the Garhwal region, that, and also, trapping unsuspecting, that workers, that they were working there. They wouldn't have expected all these things, that where, especially 2 hydropower projects in that particular region, that it is that way, Tapovan power project, we are talking about. So scores of people are still missing, that's a crime. So the government, keep on announcing compensation, that nothing can be compensated when there is loss of life to the bereaved family members, you might be aware. But, that of course, it's the nature, unprotectability. Nature is supreme. Nature is, that uninvincible. You might be aware. Nature can never be defeated. So scores of people are still missing in the wave of water and silt and debris, and that swamped the rivers and filled tunnels of, the Tapovan power project we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So although the immediate, rescue of nearly, that it's very, that several dead bodies, that by Indo-Tibetan border police force, army, and other agencies, of course, it may bring some sort of cheer. But the point is, what about the rest of the people lost their lives? We couldn't even, that imagine, that the loss of life and livelihood. And, of course, see how the power project, that see, it's a complete mud. It's a new landscape what we witness. Rescuers face a challenging environment as they try to locate many survivors and they bring relief supplies to the paralyzed communities. That's happening. It's that it's recently that we are yet to come out of that this COVID crisis. You got one more. So these immediate measures are important. That along with speedy compensation to the affected families, the governments are at the state level, central level trying. That, but we have to do more. But the center and Uttarakhand government cannot ignore the very larger context of states increasing vulnerability in the face of environmental shocks. It's not, prevention is better than cure. What is the use of postmortem? So let's be prepared more so that we can avoid, situations like that in the future, whether it is disastrous angle or threatening food security or even energy security angle. Ladies and gentlemen, so that demands our proactiveness. We don't want, we should not be reactionary to these events. So situation demands us, that proactive and also, chalk out plans, that strategies accordingly, and also decrease our dependency in that particular region and go for alternative, the mechanisms, to meet our needs that way. And you might be aware, that the very Chipko movement, they will hug the very tree, that they won't allow people to, that cut down the tree, that awareness, consciousness from very rural people, you might be aware. We are talking about, so thanks to Chipko movement, we are talking about. So the very important, the environmentalism, the Sundarlal Bhaguguna, the Chipko movement, and also Gaura Devi, we are talking about. The states, the deep gorges and canyons have attracted many hydroelectric projects. That the very region, the chosen for building many hydroelectric dams, that. So he was advising, that against this. What is the point? He said, no, not at all. It's vulnerable to earthquake. So, it's with a little concern, that the very Chipko movement, Sundarlal Baguna, you might be well aware, ladies and gentlemen. So what happened? The red flags have been, raised repeatedly. Don't do that like that. What is the point? Particularly after the moderate quake, 1991, the moderate earthquake we are talking about, that happened, ladies and gentlemen. And also the Tehri Dam was built in that particular region, and we are talking about, all those vulnerable. You exert pressure on that, the seismically vulnerable zone. That's a problem. And also, that the very Kedarnath 2013 floods that devastated the Kedarnath. All these things, the pointing the threat from seismicity, the dam induced micro seismicity. So we built dam that exerted pressure on that seismic zone. That resulted in all these things we are talking about, the landslides, floods, that from a variety of causes, including unstable glacial lakes, and climatic change, global warming, everything can be linked. So the role of, it's a man-made disaster, anthropogenic factor in this we are talking about. So, we went against, we ignored the advice of, people, the environmentalism, of course, Chipko movement like people. So we are talking, we have to be conscious, we have to wake up, and we have to hereafter, we can't ignore, that ultimately, that to lose lives, that. So that's wrong. So India is heavily invested in dam development and growth of, hydropower projects. And given thing, that the reducing fossil fuel, so we do not want to add more water, the carbon in the atmosphere, but that's where we are. But it has got another threat. What is that? So the dams located in the seismic region, exerting more pressure on that particular region, ultimately causing, that, so this, that earthquake or, heavy flood. Of course, that the washed away, the otherwise you talk about, the flash flood, we are talking about everything, ladies and gentlemen. So largely in that particular Himalayan region, we are talking about that too, the third pole of the world. Otherwise, you talk about, all mountains are called water towers. We are talking about, especially, that. So we did all those things. Why? To cut the carbon emission, but it has got other way around effects. Oh my God! So we have to, that we have to be more proactive, taking into account. We should not ignore the call from, environmental activists or environmental people, and the geologists, and we have to understand that way. That, so experts from, the disastrous angle. So by one estimate, if the national plan to construct dams in 28 river valleys in the hills, by one estimate, is realized in few decades, the Indian Himalayas will have one dam in every 32 kilometers. Of course, there will be several dams. You just think about, those dams ultimately making, impact, exerting pressure on that, the very fragile, vulnerable region. And when there is, going to be the melting, the sudden, given global warming, what will happen? The flash flood, that ultimately, that the avalanche is like. So it is ultimately the world's, highest density of dams in that particular region. That to that region, a seismic zone we are talking about. We should not exert or disturb, that we should not, make it more vulnerable. That's what, that the environmental activists, people from environmentalism whose cry there we are talking about. As researchers say, this may be miscalculation for reasons including potential earthquake impacts and monsoonal aberrations, and that could repeat, that the Kedarnath. The history repeats, of course. If you're not, if you don't learn lesson out of it, what is the use? That is a German. So severe, that biodiversity loss, and importantly, extreme danger to communities downstream. The loss of life and livelihood we are talking about. Loss of lives and livelihood we are talking about. So disasters angle, threatening food security, threatening energy security, and prompting government to go for alternative mechanisms. Already we have got the deficit in the budget. We got National Disaster Management Authority, disaster measures. We have to think about loss of life. And given that India, the youngest, the country in the aging world, young population, if we lose, just imagine, we lose our market, we lose our purchasing power, we lose our future. So we have to be very careful. We should not take that a stand which is reactionary. We are supposed to be proactive in this connection. So there is also some evidence that life of dams is often that exaggerated, and siltation which reduces it grossly underestimated. We have to take into account all these points. So the Bakra Dam in Himachal Pradesh, we are talking about, for instance, siltation was high by 140% than calculated. So whatever dam you build, immediately it will become level playing field. What is the because heavy erosion, the sediments brought down by the runoff we are talking about, and the speed with which, and the frequency of floods also you witness. It is that way. So the calculation should be pakka in that sense. So the need is to rigorously study the impact policy on the Himalayas. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, we have to rigorously study the impact of policy on the Himalayas and confine hydro projects to those with least impact, not with that seismically vulnerable region. Where it is very least, we have to locate, we have to house them. It is that way. So I rely more on low impact runoff, the power projects that need no destructive, that large dams and reservoirs we are talking about. So that it should not become disastrous. We have to think, we have to calculate carefully. We have to that. So the SWOT analysis in that way, strength, weakness, opportunities, threat, of course, what we are talking about. That it should be properly done by policymakers and also the people part of execution, and that where all stakeholders, that the experts, that of course the climate experts, otherwise that the seismologists we are talking about, and also that and geographical experts we are talking about. That so we have to take into account. So in that way we can mitigate the the very reduction, and before going to the very resources, ladies and gentlemen, I felt this is my responsibility to take you to that one second. Yeah. So that when I was preparing, that I also witnessed that one more article, of course, from the very Times Now. Yeah, Times Now. This article is all about that why Nanda Devi glaciers melted in peak winter. The scientists explain anomaly. That this is another article. Though I gathered very that Business Standard, the Week, and also that several international articles to support the contribution, ladies and gentlemen. This article also talking about that one important point. This is right time. So the monster of the climatic change has a firm grip on the ecological balance of the world. You understand? Monster of the climatic change, and its impact on eco balance of the world. And disasters such as Chamoli and Kedarnath 2013 flash floods are likely to get more frequent. Hereafter, it's not the 2 episodes incidents over. You may get more also. Who knows? Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking, that so that as glaciers lose more masses, that the dwindling number we are talking about. So that it is that way. In the last 15 years, what happened? That the very article speaks that way, ladies and gentlemen. So the mountains of Himalayas, bit ideal to the last of the glaciers, unless there is a drastic correction in use of fossil fuels. We add more carbon in the atmosphere. It's a human-induced global warming and other factors affecting the global warming. We have to take care of that. And the very study also revealed that this melting, the means that runoff is 1.6 times greater than the glacier were still. That's what the speed, the frequency and speed we are talking about. So that's resulting in the seasonal flooding and the creation of many glacial lakes. And my courtesy, thanks to this article, keep on day. Someone, of course, that Times Now, let me appreciate the contribution, ladies and gentlemen. So it is that way resulting in the seasonal flooding and the creation of many glacial lakes we are talking about, and that create the risk of catastrophic outbursts, the very floods we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. And also by 2035 the Himalayan glaciers will have drained themselves. See this particular research. We spoke another research by 2000. That's that through Ohio State University, and that of course the very Netherlands research team between 2045 to 2065 they put, but by 2035 this research says the Himalayan glaciers will have drained themselves in a century. That we will be that staring at the bare rocks of Himalayas, Huh? All this would have, it will be looking like bare rock. Okay, unless climatic change tackled urgently. The clarion call we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So this particular article, that where we are talking about, yes, I think let me take you to the very. So when a portion of the famed Nanda Devi glacier broke up Sunday, I think this is about that particular incident we are talking about. So that has triggered, the natural calamities like massive flash floods. Where, which that region you might be well aware. This article, let me link. Of course, this is fantastic. You got the idea now. And Dauli Ganga, Alkananda rivers, where we are talking about, and washing away some people alive and trapping many under landslide debris. This article I thought of connecting with that, you might be able. So, and also we talk about two hydel power projects have been damaged, and that we said Tapovan and that Vishnu, that we spoke that way, and the rescue and evacuation operations that underwent and also still going on around Chamorro district, and high alert warning also we hear that the surrounding districts of Pauri, Tehri, Rudraprayag, Haridwar, Dehradun, that is in German. And it was that reminiscent in so many ways of what happened 2013, the Kedarnath flooding, and 1991 earthquake also we are talking about. So the flash floods of Uttarakhand's Kedarnath region, the blamed on glacial activities, ladies and gentlemen. And also that the very the support from that NDRF, SDRF, we spoke at length, and how that the natural tragedy is getting tackled. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, the very mighty Nanda Devi is that way. I think that you can, how it looks like, the very melting happened here. The climatic change, you have to understand that, ladies and gentlemen, it is very real, and that you also understand that in presenting the danger, that I'm getting support. In addition to that, we're talking about additional article, maybe giving you this particular information. We're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So what does this article says? That this is additional information in addition to that of what we spoke, what we discussed at length. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an anomaly. In winters, glaciers remain firmly frozen. Even walls of glacial lakes are tightly bound. Let me read that. The flood of this sort in this season is usually caused by an avalanche or landslide. Neither seems to be the case here. This is according to Manish Mehta, a senior scientist of part of that Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology. He also we spoke the global research of Indian research. Who spoke to this that newspaper. Of course, we are talking about. So that he could not cite that any precedent, but his quote or claim gains authority because when he had led the study in 2020, which had found that 8 key glaciers in the Himalayas were melting twice as fast as assessed earlier. You just see, this is according to Manish Mehta, a senior scientist at Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology we are talking about, whose report. So that the very study in 2020 they conducted in such a way, which is very authoritative in its own opinion. What is the point? Of course, 8 key glaciers in the Himalayan region were melting twice as fast as assessed earlier. That you just see alarm situation. That the report given. Of course, Mehta's team had found that the upper catchment of Rishi Ganga in the Himalayas, the glaciers such as that Uthari Nandi Devi, you're talking about not Nandi Devi, Nanda Devi, and Chang Bang and Ramni Bang, and maybe if my pronunciation is wrong, please correct me. Of course, Betar Toli, Trishul, and Dakshini Nanda Devi, and Dakshini Rishi Bank, and Round Bank. All these things, that they have lost 10% of their mass, the glacial mass. Okay, in less than 3 decades, in 30 years, they have lost 10%. So the very speed with which they are losing their ice sheets, ladies and gentlemen, that's that very alarming we are talking about. It is not only that, that 243 square kilometer, that in 1980, the very glacier it was, the glacier had shrunk to, shrunk to 217% when mapped in 2017. What it was in 1980, 243 square kilometer. So the reduction, otherwise shrinkage happened by 217%. What it was mapped, that when it was mapped in 2017. Oh my God! You just imagine. Shockingly, that the Uttari Nanda Devi had receded the most, 7.7%. We are talking about. So it is that way. So it is observed. It is how it's, the alarming situations are happening very faster and frequency, and several things may get repeated in the future also. That's a crime. We have to wake up. That we need proactive measures now, not reactionary measures. It's not simply announcing compensation and rescuing people. What is the use after the death of rescuing people? Prevention is better than cure. Of course, nature has got its own devastation. We understand. At least that the adaptation to change. That's very important. So we have to think about alternative, the course of actions, and we have to reduce our dependency in that particular region, as we spoke in several recommendations. So the glacier burst on, that recently happened in Rishiganga catchment, that mentioned, that in this study we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So the Times of, that India report also, states authority about equilibrium, line attitude of glaciers, where one talking about balance between mass gained and mass lost over a year, and also talking about several ratios here, ladies and gentlemen. So, and you have to understand the ratio balance also, that the very new mass glacier mass created and the mass lost, the very balance has been fluctuating. We are talking about, so between 5,200 meter above the sea level and 5,000, that the very 700 meter we are talking about, 5,200 meter to 5,700 meter. That doesn't carry so much when the climate coordinations are consistent. That this is not me, MPS Bisht, and who is the director of Uttarakhand Space Application Center, USAC. We are talking about, that's another research, that this is Indian version. Ladies and gentlemen, either we spoke about global version. What about the Indian, institutes, Indian, the scientists, of course, the experts in this field opinion, that's mandatory. And also USAC, the Uttarakhand Space Application Center, is part of the study along with IIT Kanpur and that HNB Garhwal University we are talking about. And another climatic, the change study revealed that this melting means a runoff, which is, that 1.6 times, greater than the stable glaciers. That resulted in this, seasonal flooding and creation of many glacial lakes that create, the risk of catastrophic outburst we are talking about. Of course, here you see, that, ladies and gentlemen, regional strategic committee, how the upper Indus Basin network, so what that prompted some sort of actions. Government started working on in it, and not only that, the flippers wester, we are talking about the upper Indus 1.5, that degree Celsius global temperature can increase. That means 25% reduction of the glacier in the Karakoram range and 50% reduction in the Hindu Kush region. When? By 2100. Oh my God, that is the thing, they are talking about. This is, Flippers Bester, that the highest temperature, his Twitter, we are talking about, that the highest temperature changes in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region will also be seen, the very red region. We are talking about the very red region, this region. So this and all, the several, the things, ladies and gentlemen, you can go through. That way, of course, that even the spy, the satellites, that raising, much alarm about this. Even the National Geographic report also speaking that way. The hotter temperatures have melted, such as the quarter of Himalayan glacial ice in the past 40 years we are talking about. That reveals the study of, declassified spice satellite, the satellite photos, especially from 1970s. This is National Geographic report you come to know. It is German. So the loss of, the glaciers in the past 40 years. And Himalayan mountains are home to the highest peak, that not only the Nanda Devi peak, the Karakoram, you talk about Mount Everest, 29,029 feet, you might be well aware, which has got, third largest deposit of ice and snow. That's why third pole. This is after Arctic and Antarctic region. We already spoke this particular information. Not only that, National Geographic report also says the very US spy satellites, the KH-9 hexagon military satellites that were utilized between 1973 and 1980, to be precise. We are talking about the part of, the several study, included photographing of the very Himalayan region. They also reveal the very glaciers in Himalayas, that lost billion tons of ice. It is in German. Of course, that I think we can expect this more impact from 2035 to 2065. We lose more. That's the point we are talking about. Equivalent to more than a vertical foot and half of the ice each year from 2000 to 2060. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. So we have to, India must fear rising temperature and threat of, water scarcity. That's what we spoke at length, ladies and gentlemen. It's a threatening energy security, threatening, the food security, and also the disastrous, the loss of lives and livelihood. We spoke at length. So the global temperatures rise even 1 degree is indeed enough to produce massive loss of, glacier ice. We are talking about the 1 degree Celsius increase, a huge change we are talking about. As I said, for every 1 degree Celsius rise on the planet of the Earth, of course, we lose 10% of species. We spoke already from environmental ethics side. So it's not me saying, of course, that George, that Schaeffer, a professor at Columbia University, and Lament, that Duarte Earth Observatory we are talking about, that they also, that corroborate, support this particular view. And in the middle of, that the last ice age, the mean annual temperature was only 3 degree, Celsius cooler. But in May 2012, one such flood killed 60 people in village like, that nearby Nepal we are talking about, Pokhara, that will be fantastic, Pokhara. It also destroyed houses and infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about, that we can also, that how this particular video, what happened in that, Nepal probably, and you can, that if you want, I can play to some extent. Okay. Hope you hear. How this flash flood coming, ladies and gentlemen. See, it's coming this way. Someone took photograph. So this is, that what happened 2012, Pokhara, Nepal. We are talking about. I want you to watch this. Maybe you can get this live experience by this. See, I think I should have showed this video the beginning of this session itself. But anyway, because we had several points to discuss. I don't know how your audio will be. I hear. I don't know how you hear. You hear the video, audio also? Please tell me. Type. See the extent. How this way you can. So this is near Nepal, 2012. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, how people, actually it killed 60 people there. See, see the people directly viewing this. I think this is enough. See the way with which the speed with which it emerges. Yeah. See, wow. Almost 27 events like this, that have happened. The frequency with which we are talking about. So that's a message, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, that not only that, the very geologists at the university, Duncan Quincy, he's also, that of course warming, that giving, the glaciers warming. internally the disaster looms. That's another alarming situation we're talking about. That University of Leeds in the UK, another the threatening call from there we are talking about. So several research like this, ladies and gentlemen, people are talking about the Himalayans, that especially the very that a geologist who works in the Himalayan region on a research project called Everdrill, talking about that's the thing. And that already we are close to the melting point. The large volume of ice in that particular region, very close to the melting point. That's the thing we are talking about. It's not only that. One more thing: the Clippest Vester of the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. We are talking about ICIMOD. Let me repeat: Clippest Vester of the International Center for the Integrated Mountain Development, and reportedly saying, what is that? The global warming is on track to transform the frigid glacier-covered mountain peaks to bare rocks in a little less than a century. Less than 50 years, we are likely to see a bare rock in that particular region without glaciers. So, that especially the Twitter handle we are talking about. So, a regional intergovernmental knowledge center working across eight Hindu Kush Himalayan, the countries. Of course, I said the Central Asia, South Asia. In that particular region, we have seen the vast impact, ladies and gentlemen. The Himalayan ranges and its glaciers as one of the world's most significantly, yet often overlooked mountain regions. We are talking about, and the findings are more significant now than ever. Why? There will be several in the future, the prediction says, and frequency with which we are talking about. So it is that way, ladies and gentlemen, in the less than 15 years, the mountains of Himalayas will aid you to last of the glaciers, unless there is a drastic correction in use of fossil fuel and other factors affecting global warming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the right time. Let's wake up. So glaciers in the Garhwal Himalaya in India are retreating so fast that researchers believe that most central and eastern Himalayan glaciers would virtually disappear by 2035. That's a study and it's warning we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat. I think you got the point. This is Clippest Vester, and we spoke at length how the glaciers and Indian measures the regional strategic, the committee meeting. We are talking about the Upper Indus Basin Network. We are talking about, and also this is Nanda Devi Peak. Of course, this is the very region. Of course, how it's going on. You have seen the video. Also, this is article came in Times Now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is fantastic. Of course, this is the right time. Let me take you to the next thing. What is the point? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, what are all the resources? As I said, the articles from Business Standard this week. I consulted, the several, the articles for presenting you. Of course, you can make use of that. And also, if you go through Katriga Muttana, Kadathiru Varum, anything which is very, very important in terms of socio-economic, environmental, and political angle, of course, it will find its own place. You might be aware, especially in the editorials of Indian Express, and also, the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha TV debates, and that you can also get the support of commercial guides to understand more NCERT books, even the textbooks, NCERTs. Of course, Go Chomlian like book to get more information. But it's linked to the current affairs. That's and also that environmental science, Indian economy, geography. Yeah, it's loss of life, loss of lives we are talking about, livelihood we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I would have made your time worthwhile. You please that it is right time that make use of that the resources available. We took that opportunity. Why? The context which has got its own relevant in the recent that especially what happened the recent that the 2020 mains that we had a question based on this. I think this is my humble attempt so that you understand the impact over water resources, threatening food security, threatening energy security. This is apart from disastrous angle, ladies and gentlemen. So this is Success Sampath so far, hitherto interacted with you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcoming you once again to Unacademy, ladies and gentlemen. Use my referral ID say success to avail maximum 10% discount. Ladies and gentlemen, please go for plus and iconic program. I think we can meet, the tomorrow same time with another topic, so that, with the blessings of the God, this is my humble attempt, I would like to add more value in terms of your understanding when it comes to civil service examination preparation. Ladies and gentlemen, all my future leaders, future officers as IAS, IPS, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet tomorrow. Thank you for your passions. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy. This is Success Sampath. Hitherto interacted with you. Let's meet tomorrow and have a good day. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.